He cheated on his wife for 2 years. He moved millions into secret accounts. He brought his mistress to their anniversary dinner. And when his wife confronted him, he looked her in the eye and said, "You have nothing, and no one will ever believe you." Then he walked into divorce court smiling. 3 days straight, his lawyers called her delusional. His mistress sat in the gallery and watched. Then the judge pressed play, and the voice that came through the speakers was his own. This is the story of a man who deleted every message, wiped every phone, hid millions across 3 states, and walked into court absolutely certain he was untouchable. He forgot one thing: a small silver voice recorder sitting on his own desk. Still on, still recording. And his wife had been listening for 7 months. Now, before we go any further, if you are new here, this is what we do. We tell stories about people who were counted out, written off, and told they had nothing, and who came back with something that changed everything. If you have ever been underestimated, you are in the right place. Subscribe right now so you do not miss a single story, and stay until the end of this one, because the last recording is the one that breaks him. But before we get to the courtroom, you need to understand how it started. She found the apartment on a Wednesday, not because he slipped up, not because a friend told her, not because she went looking for it. She found it because the doorman at their building handed her a package that was not addressed to their address. It was addressed to a unit on the Upper West Side, a unit she had never heard of. The doorman apologized. Wrong delivery, a simple mix-up. But the name on the package was her husband's, Graham Aldridge. Unit 14, C 415 West 72nd Street. She stood in the lobby of their Central Park penthouse, holding a brown cardboard box addressed to a second home she did not know existed, and she felt the ground beneath her disappear. She did not open the box. She did not drive to the address. She did not call a friend, or her mother, or a lawyer. She went upstairs, placed the box on the kitchen counter, and sat in the dark for 4 hours, waiting for her husband to come home. 4 hours. In those 4 hours, she replayed 12 years of marriage. The early years when Graham was still hungry and kind. The nights they ate takeout on the floor of their first apartment because they could not afford a dining table. The way he used to hold her hand in taxis for no reason. And then, the slow shift. The late nights that became routine. The phone calls taken in other rooms. The way his eyes started to look through her instead of at her. The time she wore a new dress to one of his firm dinners and he looked at her and said, "That is a lot of effort for a Tuesday." She had told herself it was stress. She had told herself it was the business. She had told herself that marriages go through phases and that love is patient and that good wives hold things together even when they are falling apart. 4 hours in the dark, and she finally understood. It was not stress. It was not a phase. It was intentional. He arrived at 11:15. Loosened tie. Faint cologne that was not his usual. He kissed her on the forehead and said, "Long day." She looked at the box on the counter. He looked at the box on the counter. And in the silence between them, everything that was about to happen began. Graham Aldridge was the kind of man who believed that intelligence was the same thing as power. He was a partner at one of the largest private equity firms in New York. He managed portfolios worth more than some countries. He spoke at conferences. He shook hands with senators. He made decisions over lunch that affected thousands of jobs. And he had been cheating on his wife, Noelle, for 2 years. Not carelessly, not recklessly, strategically. The other woman was Margot Ellison, 31, Columbia MBA, junior associate at a rival firm. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine and spoke like she belonged in a boardroom. Graham did not stumble into the affair. He walked into it with his eyes open and his contingency plans already drawn. He rented the apartment on West 72nd under a corporate subsidiary. He paid for everything through a secondary account that Noelle had no access to. He used a separate phone, Prepaid, untraceable, replaced every 60 days. He deleted every message within minutes of reading it. He never used Margot's name in any digital communication. He scheduled their time together around Noelle's patterns, her Tuesday night book club, her Thursday morning yoga, her Saturday visits to her mother upstate. He was meticulous. He was disciplined. He was, in his own estimation, untouchable. But discretion requires effort, and Graham grew tired of effort. It started small. He brought Margot to an industry event, not as a date officially, but they arrived together and left together, and anyone with eyes could see what they were. Then it was charity dinners. Then it was weekends in Aspen that showed up on social media. His arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, captions about new beginnings. Then came the anniversary dinner, their 12th anniversary. Noelle had booked the restaurant herself, the same Italian place where Graham had proposed. She had bought a new dress, she had written a card. She still believed at that point that the marriage could be repaired, that whatever had gone wrong could be talked through over wine and candlelight and 12 years of shared history. She arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. She ordered a glass of water. She waited. Graham walked in 20 minutes late, and he was not alone. Margot was beside him. Red dress, a confident smile, her hand resting on his arm as if it had always been there. Graham looked at Noelle. He did not flinch. He did not apologize. He walked to the table, pulled out a chair for Margot, and sat down across from his wife as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "I thought we should all be honest with each other," he said. Noelle stared at the woman sitting where a birthday card and a glass of champagne were supposed to be. "Graham," Noelle whispered, "it is our anniversary." He shrugged. "Exactly. No more pretending." Noelle stood. She left the card on the table. She walked out of the restaurant, past the host stand, past the valet, into the November air, and she did not stop walking until she was 6 blocks away and shaking so violently she had to lean against a building to stay upright. Behind her, near through the window of the restaurant, Graham poured Margot a glass of wine. That was the night something broke permanently. Not her spirit, her tolerance. And when Noelle found the package 3 weeks later, she already knew what kind of man she was dealing with. That night, after she showed him the box, he did not panic. He did not apologize. He did not even deny it. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and spoke with the same calm precision he used in negotiations. "Yes," he said. "I have the apartment." Noelle stared at him. "And yes," he continued, "there is someone else." Her breath stopped. "I am not going to insult you by pretending otherwise," Graham said. "But I want to be clear about something." He leaned forward. "You have nothing, Noelle. No proof of financial misconduct. No recordings, no messages, no photographs. I have been very careful." He paused. "So here is what is going to happen. I am going to file for divorce. You are going to accept a reasonable settlement. And we are going to move on with our lives." Noelle's hands were trembling beneath the table. "And if I don't?" she whispered. Graham smiled, the kind of smile a man wears when he believes he has already removed every obstacle. "Then you will spend 2 years in court. You will drain every dollar you have on legal fees, and at the end of it, the result will be exactly the same. Except you will be broke and exhausted, and I will still be fine." He stood up, buttoned his jacket. "I am not a monster, Noelle. I am just honest about how this works." He walked out of the kitchen. She heard him in the hallway, putting on his coat, checking his phone, the soft click of the front door, and then silence. The refrigerator hummed. The city murmured far below. The clock on the wall ticked with the steady indifference of a world that did not care what had just happened in this kitchen. Noelle sat at that table until 3 in the morning. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She did not throw anything or scream into a pillow or open a bottle of wine. She sat with the weight of what she had just heard. Not just the confession, but the calculation behind it. The precision of his cruelty. The way he had already mapped out the ending and assigned her a role in it. The quiet, defeated wife who takes the settlement and disappears. He had planned everything. The affair, the finances, the divorce, the narrative. He had scripted it like a business deal, and in his script, Noelle had no lines. And then something shifted. Not revenge, not fury. Something quieter. Something far more precise. She decided to pay attention. For the next 7 months, Noelle became invisible. Not absent, not passive. Invisible. The most dangerous kind of presence. The kind that watches without being watched. She did not confront Graham again. She did not mention the apartment. She did not bring up Margot's name, though she had figured it out within 2 weeks. She went to book club on Tuesdays. She did yoga on Thursdays. She visited her mother on Saturdays. She followed her routine exactly as Graham expected. But inside that routine, she was recording everything. Not with hidden cameras, not with spy software, not with anything Graham would think to look for. She used his own tools. Graham kept a digital voice recorder on his desk at home. A sleek silver device he used for business, dictating notes after calls, recording meeting summaries, capturing thoughts during late nights in his home office. It was always there, always visible. And Graham trusted it the way he trusted all his tools. Completely, without question, and without ever considering that someone else might understand how it worked. One evening, 3 weeks after the confrontation, Graham stormed into his home office and slammed the door. Noelle heard him from the hallway. He was on the phone, not the house phone, the other one, the prepaid. And he was angry. His voice carried through the door. Not every word, but enough. She tried the handle, locked, but she could hear the recorder's small red light blinking through the gap beneath the door. She had seen it earlier that evening, sitting on his desk. Not he had been dictating notes before the call came in. He never turned it off. After he left for the night, back to West 72nd, back to Margot, Noelle slipped into the office. The recorder was on the desk, still running, still capturing. She picked it up, pressed stop, pressed play, and heard everything. Not just the phone call, everything that had come before it. Graham, alone in his office, speaking freely, rehearsing what he would say to his lawyers, outlining his strategy for the divorce, discussing out loud exactly how he had moved money, where he had hidden it, and why Noelle would never find it. He had been dictating his own destruction and did not know it. Noelle's hand shook as she listened, not from fear, from the weight of what she was holding. She did not copy the file that night. She rewound it and set the recorder back exactly where it had been and walked out of the office. Over the next 6 months, it happened 4 more times. Graham would come home, lock himself in the office, make calls on the prepaid, pace and talk and strategize, sometimes to Margot, sometimes to his attorneys, sometimes just to himself. And the recorder would capture everything because Graham Aldridge, the man who deleted every message and wiped every device, never once thought to check the one machine he left on his own desk. Noelle copied every file, quietly, carefully, onto a USB drive she kept in a tampon box in the bathroom, the one place she knew Graham would never look. She did not tell her lawyer. She did not tell anyone, because she understood something about Graham that Graham did not understand about himself. His greatest weakness was his confidence. The moment he believed he had won, he stopped looking for threats. She would let him believe he had won for as long as possible. Before this story continues, stop and think about something. If you discovered that the person who vowed to love you had spent 2 years building a system to betray you, and then looked you in the eye and said, "You have nothing," what would you do? Would you fight immediately? Would you scream? Would you hire a lawyer and go to war? Or would you wait? Would you sit at that kitchen table and let the silence do its work? Would you smile at breakfast and go to yoga and pretend that nothing had changed? While quietly, carefully, patiently collecting every word he thought would never be heard? That is what Noel did. And what happens next will prove that patience is not weakness. It is a weapon. If you are the kind of person who finishes stories, who does not walk away when things get heavy, subscribe right now, like this video. Share it with someone who has been told they have nothing. Let us build a community of people who understand that the quietest person in the room is sometimes the most dangerous. Now let us go to the courtroom. The family court of Manhattan was standing room only on the morning the Aldridge divorce went to trial. The case had attracted attention not because of scandal. Graham had kept the affair invisible to the public, but because of money. Graham Aldridge managed billions. His personal assets were estimated north of $40 million, and his legal team was arguing that Noel deserved almost none of it. At the center table sat Noel Aldridge. Simple black dress, no jewelry, hair pulled back, hands resting on the table. Still, steady, calm. Beside her sat her attorney, Victor Sandoval, a sharp, methodical man who had spent 20 years in family law and knew that the loudest lawyer rarely wins. Across from them sat Graham, tailored navy suit, perfect posture. A pen in his hand that he clicked occasionally, not nervously, habitually, the way powerful men fidget when they are bored. Beside him sat his attorney, Lawrence Crane, a towering figure in divorce litigation who had represented CEOs, media moguls, and once, memorably, a sitting congressman. In the second row of the gallery sat Margot Ellison. She had no official reason to be there, but she had come anyway, because that was the kind of woman she was. Noel saw her immediately. She said nothing. Judge Harold Mercer presided. A meticulous man in his 60s who had a reputation for patience and an even stronger reputation for punishing people who wasted it. Day one belonged to Lawrence Crane. He stood with the confidence of a man whose hourly rate exceeded most people's monthly salary. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is a senior partner in one of this city's most respected firms. He built his career through discipline, intelligence, and sacrifice. Mrs. Aldridge, while a devoted spouse, did not contribute financially to the marriage in any measurable capacity." Noel did not react. She brought no income, no independent assets, no professional career. She managed a household, which my client funded entirely, and attended social functions as his companion. He turned to the judge. "Oh, we are not here to diminish Mrs. Aldridge's role, but we must be honest about the asymmetry of contribution." Victor objected mildly. "Your Honor, equitable distribution does not require equal financial contribution." "We are establishing context," Crane interrupted. Judge Mercer raised a hand. "Continue, Mr. Crane, but I will determine the relevance." Day one ended with the narrative firmly in Graham's favor. The dutiful husband, the provider, the man who gave everything to a woman who now wanted more than she deserved. Graham walked out of the courtroom that evening like a man leaving a restaurant where the food had been excellent. He loosened his tie, checked his phone, smiled at something on the screen, probably a message from Margot. Noel watched him from across the lobby. She watched the ease in his step, the way he tossed his head back slightly when he laughed, the absolute certainty in his body language that this was already over. She clutched the strap of her bag and felt the USB drive in the inside pocket. 5 recordings, 7 months of patience. Every word he had ever said when he thought no one was listening. Not yet, she told herself. Let him finish building the lie first. Because lies, she had learned, are most devastating when they are fully constructed before the truth arrives. Day 2 was designed to break Noelle. Crane called a financial analyst who testified that Noelle had no independent income streams, no retirement accounts in her name, and no history of financial literacy beyond household budgeting. Then he called a character witness, a mutual friend named Patricia Warren, and a socialite who had attended every dinner party Noelle had ever hosted. In your experience, Mrs. Warren, how would you describe Mrs. Aldridge's role in social settings? Patricia crossed her legs. Noelle was always lovely, very attentive. She arranged flowers beautifully, made sure the caterers had everything. She was wonderful at making people feel comfortable. Would you describe her as a partner in Mr. Aldridge's professional life? Patricia hesitated. I would describe her as supportive. Supportive, Crane repeated. Not strategic, not essential. Supportive. Yes, Patricia said quietly. Noelle's fingernails pressed into her palms beneath the table. Then Crane did something that changed the temperature of the room. He introduced photographs, not of the affair, not of Margot, of Noelle, but photographs from Graham's firm events, Noelle standing slightly behind Graham, Noelle at the edge of group pictures, Noelle seated at the far end of tables while Graham occupied the center. Your Honor, Crane said, these images illustrate the dynamic of this marriage. Mr. Aldridge was the engine. Mrs. Aldridge was a passenger. Victor stood immediately. Objection. This is demeaning and irrelevant. Sustained in part, Judge Mercer said, but the photos are noted. The damage was done. Noelle felt the gallery's eyes on her. The whispers. The quiet conclusions being drawn by strangers about a marriage they had never been inside. Then Crane called Graham's business partner, a man named Hugh Ballard, to the stand. Hugh had known Graham for 15 years. They had built the firm together. Mr. Ballard, Crane said, in your professional opinion, did Mrs. Aldridge contribute to Mr. Aldridge's business success? Hugh shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at Noelle. She had hosted him and his wife for dinner at least 50 times. She had organized his surprise 50th birthday party. She had sent flowers when his mother passed. Graham is a self-made man, Hugh said carefully. His success is a product of his intelligence and work ethic. And Mrs. Aldridge's role? Hugh swallowed. She was a wonderful hostess. The word landed like a slap. Hostess, not partner, not equal. Hostess. Noelle felt her jaw tighten. She wanted to stand up and say that she had proofread every pitch deck Graham brought home. That she had stayed up until 2 in the morning reorganizing his notes before presentations. That she had held him when deals fell apart and talked him off the ledge when his firm nearly went under in year 3. But she said nothing, because she knew what was coming tomorrow. And tomorrow would say everything. Then Graham took the stand. He was polished, controlled, every answer measured. When did you realize the marriage was no longer working? Crane asked gently. Graham sighed, practiced, calibrated. When I realized that Noelle and I had grown in different directions. I love her. I will always care about her. But we want different things. And the allegations of financial misconduct? Graham shook his head. Noelle has always been anxious about money. I think the stress of the divorce has amplified that anxiety into suspicion. There is nothing hidden. Everything has been disclosed. He looked at the judge with open and honest eyes. I have nothing to hide, Your Honor. Victor cross-examined. Mr. Aldridge, are you currently in a relationship with another woman? Graham paused, perfectly timed. I have begun seeing someone, yes, after the separation. The lie was smooth as silk. The affair had started 2 years ago. He framed it as 2 months. And you maintain that all assets have been fully disclosed? Completely, Graham said. Victor sat down. He knew what was coming. Noelle had told him everything, but the timing had to be perfect. That evening, during recess, Victor leaned close to Noel. "Tomorrow?" he asked. Noel nodded. "Tomorrow." Day 3. The courtroom was fuller than the previous days. Word had spread through legal circles that the Aldridge case was worth watching, though no one could say exactly why. Graham arrived in a fresh suit, but he looked relaxed. The closing arguments would happen today. The verdict was all but certain. He glanced at Noel as he sat down. She looked the same as she had for 3 days. Still, composed, unreadable. He almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Judge Mercer entered. The room rose. "We will now hear closing arguments," the judge said. "Mr. Crane." Crane stood and delivered a masterpiece of controlled condescension. Noel was a good woman, a kind woman, but not a woman who had earned a claim to the empire Graham had built. Her allegations of hidden assets were, in Crane's carefully chosen words, the product of emotional distress, not evidence. He called her claims delusional. He called her suspicions paranoid. He said the word unstable 3 times in 6 minutes. The marriage was over. A fair settlement, his version of fair, was all that was warranted. He sat down. Graham nodded once, satisfied. "Mr. Sandoval," the judge said. Victor stood. He adjusted his jacket slowly. He was not nervous. He was precise. "Your Honor," he began. "For 3 days, this court has heard a carefully constructed narrative. A man who gave everything. A woman who contributed nothing. A marriage that simply ran its course." He paused. "It is an elegant story. Expensive. Well rehearsed." Crane's eyes narrowed. "But it is a lie." Graham's smile flickered. "My client has been described as a passenger, a bystander, a woman without value." Victor turned to the gallery. "She has sat in this courtroom for 3 days and said nothing in her own defense." He looked at Noel. Not because she had nothing to say. He turned back to the judge. Because she was waiting for the right moment to let the truth speak for itself. Judge Mercer leaned forward. "Mr. Sandoval, if you have evidence—" "I do, Your Honor." Victor reached into his briefcase and placed a sealed envelope on the table. "I would like to submit supplemental evidence." Crane shot to his feet. "Objection. Discovery is closed." "This evidence consists of audio recordings made on a device owned by the petitioner himself," Victor said calmly. "A personal voice recorder found in Mr. Aldridge's home office. The recordings were not obtained through surveillance, interception, or any illegal means. They were captured by Mr. Aldridge's own device, which he left running in a shared marital residence." Judge Mercer studied him. "How many recordings?" "5, Your Honor. Spanning 6 months." Graham felt something cold flood his chest. His recorder, his desk, his voice. No. "Your Honor, this is a violation of—" Crane began. "New York is a one-party consent state for recordings made in a shared marital home," Victor interrupted. "The device was Mr. Aldridge's property, left in a common space. My client did not install it. She did not activate it. She simply preserved what it captured." Judge Mercer nodded slowly. "I will allow it. Play the first recording." The court technician connected the USB drive. The room fell silent. Then Graham's voice filled the courtroom. Recording 1. Time stamped 5 months ago. Graham alone in his office dictating notes. "Noel found the apartment. Doesn't matter. She has nothing concrete, no paper trail, no messages. I've been clean. Crane says the filing should happen within 60 days. In the meantime, I need to finish moving the Meridian funds before disclosure." The courtroom went still. Graham's face drained of color. Crane leaned toward him urgently. Graham shook his head. His mouth was open, but no words came out. Victor let the silence breathe. Then he nodded to the technician. Recording 2. Time stamped 4 months ago. Graham on the prepaid phone. Margot's voice faintly audible on the other end. Baby, relax. She doesn't know anything. She thinks the money is in the main accounts. The Meridian restructuring closes next week, and after that, it's untraceable. A laugh. She couldn't trace a pizza delivery, trust me. Someone in the gallery gasped. Another person shook their head slowly. You get the way people do when they are watching something they cannot look away from. In the second row, Margot Ellison's composure cracked. She shifted in her seat. Her fingers tightened around her handbag. Because the voice on the recording was not just discussing Noelle. It was discussing Noelle while talking to her, which meant she was not just the other woman. She was a co-conspirator, and she had just heard the evidence played in a public courtroom. Noelle sat perfectly still. She had heard this recording 6 times already. She knew every word, every laugh, every casual cruelty. She had memorized the exact moment Graham's voice shifted from strategic to mocking. The precise second when he stopped discussing his wife as a legal obstacle and started discussing her as a joke. But hearing it in a courtroom, with the judge listening, with reporters scribbling, with Graham's face collapsing in real time, felt different. It felt like air. Like the first full breath after being held underwater for 2 years. And then movement. In the second row, Margot stood. She did not make a scene. She did not gasp or cry or whisper to the woman beside her. She simply picked up her handbag, smoothed her skirt, and walked toward the aisle. Graham saw her. His eyes tracked her movement in real time. The woman he had rented an apartment for. The woman he had chosen over his wife, the woman he had called his future, walking out of the courtroom while his own voice still echoed off the walls. She did not look back. The heavy door clicked shut behind her, and the sound was small but final. Graham stared at the empty seat. 2 years of an affair, a secret apartment, and plans for a life together. And she had walked out before the third recording even played. That was the moment Graham understood something his money and his planning had never taught him. Loyalty purchased with excitement does not survive embarrassment. Crane stood. Your Honor, these recordings lack context. Play the third, Judge Mercer said. Recording 3, time-stamped 3 months ago. Graham on the phone with someone. His tone suggested a financial advisor or accountant. The Meridian account needs to be restructured into the new LLC before January. Noelle's lawyers won't know where to look. The entity is registered in Delaware. There is no public link to my name. He paused. Yes, I know it's aggressive. That's why I'm paying you. Judge Mercer removed his glasses. Victor spoke. Your Honor, if the entity referenced, Meridian Strategic Partners LLC, was not disclosed in Mr. Aldridge's financial statements. Graham's attorney was on his feet. We need time to review. You will have time, the judge said. But the court has heard enough to proceed with immediate questions. He turned to Graham. Mr. Aldridge? Graham looked up. His hands were gripping the edge of the table. You testified under oath that all assets were fully disclosed. Graham's throat moved. You stated, and I quote, I have nothing to hide. Silence. Would you like to revise that statement? Graham looked at Crane. Crane looked at the table. There was no play left. Your Honor, Graham said slowly, the Meridian entity is a corporate investment vehicle. It is not a personal asset. Play recording 4, the judge said. Recording 4. Time-stamped 6 weeks ago. Graham again, dictating notes late at night. His voice looser now. Tired, unguarded. Move the last tranche into Meridian. Total value sitting at about $1.2 million. Noelle's team is looking at the brokerage and the checking accounts. They won't find this. Even if they suspect something, the LLC structure gives us 2 layers of separation. He yawned. Once the divorce is final, I will restructure it back. Margot and I will be in the apartment full-time by spring." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Mercer did not bang his gavel. He let the noise happen. He let it wash over Graham like a wave he could not stop. 1.2 million, hidden, structured, deliberately concealed from the court. And then he had the audacity to yawn. Victor waited for the murmur to die. Then he spoke quietly. "Thank Your Honor. There is one final recording." Graham's head snapped up. His eyes were wide now, not calculating, not strategic. Afraid. "No," he whispered, not to the judge, not to his attorney, to himself. Victor nodded to the technician. Recording 5, time-stamped 2 weeks ago. Graham's voice, late at night, loose, unguarded, talking to Margot on the prepaid phone. The tone was different from the other recordings, softer, more intimate, more honest than anything he had ever said to Noelle. "You know what the funny thing is?" Graham said on the recording. "I never loved her, not really." The courtroom froze. "I thought I did. In the beginning, maybe. But it was never. It was never what this is." There was a soft laugh from Margot on the other end. "She tried so hard," Graham continued. "She learned the wines. She memorized the names. She wore the dresses. And the whole time I just thought, you can polish a stone all you want, but it does not become a diamond." Noelle's breath stopped. "When this is over," Graham said, his voice dropping lower, almost tender, "it will just be us. The apartment, the weekends, no more pretending. I am done pretending." A pause. "She will take whatever we offer and disappear. That is what people like her do. They disappear." The recording ended. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt permanent. Not stunned silence, not dramatic silence. The silence of something that could not be taken back. Noelle felt the tears come, not from pain, not from humiliation, from finality, because she had suspected it for years. In the way he looked through her, in the way he sighed when she spoke, and in the way his hand went limp when she reached for it in bed. But suspecting and hearing are two different things. Hearing your husband tell another woman he never loved you, in his own voice, in his own words, with a tenderness he never once showed you. That is a wound that does not heal. It simply becomes part of you. Graham was staring at the table. His face was gray. His lips were pressed together so tightly they had gone white. He did not look at Noelle. He could not, because the recordings had exposed his finances, his lies, his perjury, and his arrogance. But recording 5 had exposed something worse, his emptiness. Noelle looked at Graham. For the first time in 3 days, she let herself feel something. Not anger, not vindication, relief. Because for 2 years, this man had told her she was crazy, paranoid, imagining things. He had looked into her eyes and said, "You have nothing," with the absolute certainty of a man who believed he had erased every trace. And now his own voice, captured by his own device, on his own desk, in his own home, was dismantling every lie he had ever told. Now pause with me for a moment. Think about what it takes to sit in a courtroom for 3 days and watch the man who betrayed you smile. To hear his lawyers call you a passenger in your own marriage. To see his mistress sitting in the gallery watching you be erased. And to say nothing. Not because you have nothing, but because you have everything. And you are waiting for the exact right moment to let it speak. That is not weakness. That is control. The real kind. The kind that does not announce itself. If you are still watching, you understand something most people do not. Do you understand that patience is not passive? It is strategic. It is deliberate. It is dangerous. Subscribe right now. We tell stories about people who were told they had nothing, and who handed back the truth. Drop a comment, one word. The moment you realized you were stronger than the person who underestimated you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Now let us finish this. Judge Mercer called a recess. But the recess was not calm. It was controlled demolition. Crane pulled Graham into a side room. "You told me there was nothing," Crane hissed. Graham was pacing. His tie was loosened, his hands running through his hair. "There wasn't supposed to be anything. The recorder. I didn't. You left a recording device running in your own home," Crane said flatly. "Kea, while you dictated your entire financial strategy out loud." Graham stopped pacing. "It was my business recorder. I use it for notes. I forgot." "You forgot," Crane repeated. "You forgot. Graham, you just committed perjury on tape." The word hung in the air. Graham sank into a chair. "What do we do?" Crane stared at him for a long moment. "We settle, immediately, before she plays the 5th recording." Graham looked up. "What 5th recording?" "I don't know," Crane said. "And neither do you. That's the problem." Graham pressed his palms against his eyes. "What is she asking for?" Crane sat down slowly. "After what was just played in that courtroom, she can ask for almost anything and the judge will consider it. You committed perjury on tape, Graham. You described hiding assets in your own words. You mocked your wife's intelligence while conspiring with your mistress." Graham winced at the word mistress. "The judge heard a man who planned everything," Crane continued. "Every transfer, every deletion, every lie. And the man who planned everything forgot to turn off his own recorder. Do you understand how that looks?" Graham understood. It looked like arrogance. And arrogance in a courtroom was worse than malice. Because it told the judge you believed the rules did not apply to you. "What about the criminal referral?" Graham asked quietly. Crane paused. "Perjury in family court is rarely prosecuted. But the financial concealment, especially the Delaware LLC, that could trigger interest from the state attorney general's office." Graham felt the walls closing in. "Your best move," Crane said, "is to settle generously. I cooperate fully and pray that the 5th recording doesn't contain anything worse than the first 4. Graham stared at the floor. "Is there anything worse on that recorder?" Crane asked. Graham did not answer immediately, and that silence told Crane everything he needed to know. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere had inverted. The smugness was gone. The casual confidence was gone. The gallery no longer looked at Graham with curiosity. They looked at him with the quiet fascination people reserve for watching something collapse. Margot Ellison's seat in the gallery had been empty since recording 2. She had walked out and never returned. And now Graham knew why. She had heard herself on the tape and realized she was not his future. She was his liability. Judge Mercer returned. "Before we proceed," the judge said, "the court has ordered an emergency forensic review of the Meridian entity and all associated accounts." Graham sat rigid. "Preliminary findings confirm the existence of an undisclosed LLC registered in Delaware," the judge continued, "with assets totaling approximately $1.2 million, consistent with the recording." Crane did not object. There was nothing to object to. The judge turned to Graham. "Mr. Aldridge, you have testified under oath that all assets were disclosed. You have stated before this court that you have nothing to hide." Graham said nothing. The recordings suggest otherwise. The financial review confirms otherwise. Silence. This court finds preliminary evidence of intentional financial concealment, perjury, and deliberate obstruction of equitable discovery. Graham's shoulders dropped. Additionally, the judge continued, recording 2 confirms that the extramarital relationship began well before the date Mr. Aldridge stated under oath. Another lie, exposed by his own mouth. Victor spoke. "Your Honor, my client wishes to address the court." Noelle stood slowly. The room held its breath. She looked at Graham. Not with fury, not with satisfaction, with something more devastating. Clarity. For 2 years, she said quietly, you told me I was imagining things. Graham stared at the table. When I asked about the late nights, you said I was paranoid. When I asked about the money, you said I didn't understand finance. When I asked about the perfume on your shirts, you laughed and told me I was losing my mind. Her voice was steady, not a single crack. You sat across from me at our kitchen table and told me I had nothing. No proof, no evidence, no leverage. You told me exactly how this would end, with me leaving quietly and you moving on without a scratch. She paused. You were wrong about one thing. Graham looked up. You thought I wasn't listening, but I was. I was always listening, and so was the recorder you left on your own desk. The courtroom was completely silent. You erased every message. You wiped every phone. You deleted every email. You thought you had removed every trace. She let the words settle. But you could not erase your own voice. Graham's eyes were glassy. You called me a passenger in this marriage. Your lawyers showed photographs of me standing behind you at parties, as if my position in a picture defined my value. She paused. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. You want to know what a passenger does, Graham? A passenger sits still. A passenger goes where they are taken. A passenger does not steer. She straightened. For 7 months, I steered. I listened to every recording. I copied every file. I waited through every day of this trial while your lawyers called me worthless. Because I needed everything you said to be on the court record before the truth came out. She looked at the judge. I was never a passenger. She looked back at Graham. I was the one driving. You just never checked the mirror. A murmur swept through the gallery. I did not do this for revenge, Noelle said. I did it because for 2 years, you made me believe I was crazy. You made me doubt my memory. You made me question whether I was imagining things. You looked into my eyes and told me I had nothing. Her voice softened, and I needed to hear your own voice prove that everything I felt was real. She took a breath. I pressed record. Judge Mercer delivered his preliminary ruling that afternoon. Full redistribution of all concealed assets, including the Meridian LLC. Financial sanctions for deliberate concealment and perjury. Recalculation of the marital estate to include hidden funds. Emergency freeze on all accounts pending complete forensic audit. And a referral to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to perjury. Graham sat motionless as each item was read. Crane did not speak. There was nothing to say. The total financial exposure, once Graham's hidden assets were included, was staggering. And with sanctions for perjury layered on top, Noelle's projected settlement was no longer a fraction of the estate. It was the majority of it. The woman he told would leave with nothing was about to leave with almost everything. 60%. The woman he told would leave with nothing. The weeks that followed were systematic collapse. Graham's firm placed him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the criminal referral. His managing partner, a man who had toasted Graham at the firm's 10th anniversary gala, called him personally. Graham, he said, the board feels it's best if you take some distance. Distance, Graham repeated. I built this firm. And right now, your name is a liability. 3 partners quietly requested that his name be removed from client-facing materials. 2 major clients transferred their portfolios to competing firms within the week. And the whisper network in Manhattan finance moved faster than any headline. And the whisper was simple. Graham Aldridge got caught. Not by regulators, not by forensic accountants, by his own voice recorder. The humiliation was not the financial penalty. It was the specificity of the failure. A man who prided himself on eliminating every trace had been undone by the one device he left on his own desk. In the world of Manhattan finance, incompetence was forgiven faster than carelessness. Margot Ellison, the woman who had walked out of the courtroom during recording 2 and never returned, officially ended things via text message. 14 words. "I think we should take some space. This is not what I signed up for." 14 words. That was what 2 years of an affair was worth when the money and the reputation disappeared. Graham read the message 3 times. He almost laughed. He had left Noelle, a woman who had stayed with him for 12 years, who had held his hand when his father died, who had learned his world from scratch and never once complained, for a woman who could summarize their entire relationship in a text message shorter than a lunch order. He had told Noelle on that recording that Margot was his future, that when it was over, it would be just us, that he was done pretending. Now Margot was done too. Except she was not pretending. She was simply leaving. The way people leave when the thing they were attracted to no longer exists. He sat in the West 72nd Street apartment, the one he had rented for their future. Alone, surrounded by furniture he had bought for a life that no longer existed. The view was beautiful. The silence was unbearable. Noelle did not celebrate. She moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn. A walk-up with creaky floors and a kitchen the size of a closet. It was the first space that had ever been entirely hers, and she loved every square foot of it. She started therapy. She reconnected with her sister, who had been telling her for years that something was wrong with Graham. She started running in the mornings. Not far, not fast, but steady. She slept through the night for the first time in 2 years. She did not check Graham's social media. She did not ask about Margot. She did not follow the news about his firm. She simply stopped carrying the weight of a man who had never carried hers. Victor called her one afternoon. The forensic audit found a second entity, another LLC, registered in Wyoming this time. Assets of approximately $600,000. Noelle closed her eyes. He was hiding more? He was hiding everything, Victor said quietly. Layer after layer. The man built a financial maze designed to make sure you walked away with nothing. How did they find it? Recording 3, Victor said. He mentioned the LLC structure, giving him 2 layers of separation. The forensic team followed the layers. Wyoming was the second one. The additional discovery added to the sanctions. The Wyoming LLC was dissolved by court order. The funds were folded into the equitable distribution. When all concealed assets were included, the total marital estate was recalculated at nearly $12 million. Noelle's final share, after sanctions for perjury, penalties for deliberate concealment, and the court's recognition of sustained spousal deception, came to 68% of everything. 68%. The woman he told would leave with nothing walked away with more than 2/3 of every dollar he had ever hidden, invested, structured, and lied about. The woman who could not trace a pizza delivery had traced every lie back to its source. But the number was not what Noelle remembered most. She remembered the sound of his voice in that courtroom, the voice that had whispered threats in their kitchen, the voice that had told her she was crazy, the voice that had laughed with his mistress about how she was nothing, the voice that had told another woman he had never loved her. That same voice, played through courtroom speakers, destroying every lie it had ever told. 6 months later, Noelle sat in a quiet cafe near the Brooklyn Bridge. Sunlight came through the window and fell across her hands. Her phone buzzed. A message from a number she did not recognize. Noelle, it's Graham. I know I don't deserve to reach out, but I wanted you to know. I'm sorry, not for getting caught, for what I did to you, for making you doubt yourself, for all of it. She stared at the message for a long time. She did not reply. Not because she was angry, not because she was bitter, because she had already said everything she needed to say. In a courtroom, in front of a judge, with his own voice as her witness. Some conversations are finished. A year later, a journalist asked Noelle a question during a podcast interview. You sat in that courtroom for 3 days and said nothing while they tore you apart. How did you do that? Noelle thought for a moment. Because I knew what was on that USB drive, she said. and I knew that the longer he talked, the deeper he buried himself. The journalist leaned forward. What would you say to someone in a similar situation? Someone who's been told they have no proof? That no one will believe them? Noelle smiled. Small, quiet, certain. I would tell them to listen carefully, she said. Because the people who tell you that you have nothing are usually the ones who are hiding everything. She paused. And I would tell them to check the devices. There is a truth about people who believe they are untouchable. They do not fail because they are not smart. They fail because they are so smart that they stop imagining anyone else could be smarter. Graham Aldridge deleted every message. He wiped every phone. He structured hidden accounts across 3 states. He hired the most expensive attorney in the city. He smiled through 3 days of divorce court while his mistress watched from the gallery. And he forgot to turn off his own recorder. 1 device, 1 desk, 5 recordings. 7 months of patience. And a wife who was listening the entire time. He told her she had nothing. He told her no one would believe her. He told her she would leave quietly and he would move on without a scratch. He was right about one thing. She did leave quietly, but she took everything with her. Now here is what I need from you. You watched this entire story. You stayed. You did not leave when it got heavy. When the courtroom went silent, you leaned in. That tells me who you are. Subscribe, not because I asked, and because you know there are more stories like this one. Stories about people who were told they had nothing and who pressed play. Hit the like button. It takes half a second and it tells the algorithm to push this story to someone else who needs it tonight. Drop a comment, 1 word. The moment you stopped believing their version and started trusting your own. Because if this story teaches us anything, it is this. You cannot erase your own voice. And truth does not need permission. It just needs someone willing to press play.